a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy.
Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana, originally released in Japan as Seiken Densetsu 2, is a 1993 action role-playing game developed and published by Square for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. It is the sequel to the 1991 game Seiken Densetsu, released in North America as Final Fantasy Adventure and in Europe as Mystic Quest. And it was the first Seiken Densetsu title to be marketed as part of the Mana series rather than the Final Fantasy series. Set in a high fantasy universe, the game follows three heroes as they attempt to prevent an empire from conquering the world with the power of an ancient flying fortress, rather than using a turn-based battle system like contemporaneous role-playing games. Secret of Mana features real-time battles with a power bar mechanic. The game has a unique ring command menu system, which pauses the action and allows the player to make decisions in the middle of battle. An innovative cooperative multiplayer system allows a second or third player to drop in and out of the game at any time. Secret of Mana was directed and designed by Koichi Ishii, programmed primarily by Nazir G. Belli, and produced by veteran Square designer Hiromichi Tanaka. The game received considerable acclaim for its brightly colored graphics, expansive plot, ring command menu system, and innovative real-time battle system. Critics also praised the soundtrack by Hiroki Kikuta, and the customizable artificial intelligence settings for computer-controlled allies. The original version was released for the Nintendo Wii's Virtual Console in Japan in September 2008, and for the Wii's Virtual Console in June 2013. The game was ported to mobile phones in Japan in 2009, and an enhanced port of the game was released for iOS in 2010 and Android in 2014. Nintendo re-released in September 2017 as a part of the company's Super NES Classic Edition. A full 3D remake was released for the PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, and Microsoft Windows in February 2018. Gameplay. Like many other role-playing games of the 16-bit era, Secret of Mana displays a top-down perspective, in which the player characters navigate the terrain and fight off hostile creatures. The game features three such characters: the hero, the girl, and the sprite, named Randy, Prim, and Popoy outside the initial North American and European releases. The player can choose to control each of the characters at any time, whichever character is currently selected. The other two companions are controlled via artificial intelligence. The game may be played simultaneously by up to 3 players, made possible by the Super Multi-Tap accessory for the Super NES console. The Virtual Console version of the game supports 3-player gameplay via additional GameCube controllers. Are classic controllers. Each character possesses individual strengths and weaknesses. The hero, while unable to use magic, masters weapons at a quicker rate. The girl is a healer, able to cast restorative and support spells, and the sprite casts offensive magic to damage and impair enemies. Upon collecting enough experience points in battle, each character increases in level and improves in areas such as strength and evasion. The trio can rest in towns, where they can regain hit points or purchase restorative items and equipment. Options such as changing equipment, casting spells, or checking status are performed by cycling through the game's ring commands. A circular menu which hovers over the currently controlled party member. The game is momentarily paused whenever the ring commands appear. Combat takes place in real time. Located at the bottom of the screen is a power bar, a gauge that determines the amount of damage done to an enemy when attacking. Swinging a weapon causes the gauge to empty and then quickly recharge, allowing that character to attack at full strength. The party wields 8 different types of weaponry: sword, spear, bow, axe, boomerang, glove, whip, and javelin. All weapons can be upgraded 8 times, and repeated use of a weapon increases its skill level to a maximum of 8, unlocking a new special attack with each level. Weapons are upgraded with weapon orbs, which are found in dungeons or earned by defeating certain bosses. The player takes each orb to a blacksmith, located in most towns, who uses it to reforge one weapon. In order to learn magic, the party must rescue spirits known as elementals. The 8 elementals represent different elements, such as water, earth, and life, and each provides the player with specific spells. Magic has skill levels similar to weapons, but each magic spell costs magic points to cast. At the start of the game, to reach a destination, players must traverse an enemy-infested countryside. Travel may be expedited with cannon travel centers, where the party may be launched to faraway destinations via a giant cannon. Cannon travel usually requires a fee, but is mandatory to visit other continents later on. Later, the party is given access to Flammy, a miniature dragon, which is controlled by the player and able to fly freely across the world, represented by an overworld map. These sequences make use of the SNES's Mode 7 capability to create a rotatable background, giving the illusion that the ground beneath Flammy is rendered in 3 dimensions. While riding Flammy, the player may access either the rotated map, which presents the world as a globe, or the world map, a 2-dimensional view of the overworld. Setting and characters. The story takes place in a high fantasy world, which contains an ethereal energy source named mana. An ancient, technologically advanced civilization exploited mana to construct the Mana Fortress, a flying warship. This angered the world's gods, who sent giant beasts to war with the civilization. The conflict was globally destructive, and nearly exhausted all signs of mana in the world, until a hero used the power of the mana sword to destroy the fortress and the civilization. The world began to recover in peace. As the game opens, an empire seeks 8 mana seeds, which when unsealed, will restore mana to the world and allow the Empire to restore the Mana Fortress. The 3 main characters do not have names in the original SNES release, though their names appear in the manual of the Japanese release, and their names were added into the game in the iOS port worldwide. In all versions, the player can choose to name the characters whatever they wish. A young boy, is adopted by the elder of Potos before the start of the game, after the boy's mother disappears. Is in love with a warrior named Dilik, who was ordered by the king to attack Eleni's castle. Angered by the king's actions and by her father's attempt to arrange her marriage to a local nobleman, she leaves the castle to save Dilik and to accompany the hero as well. The hero and the girl meet at the dwarf village. The sprite makes a living by scamming people at a freak show held by dwarves. It does not remember anything about its past, so it joins the team to try to recover its memories. Story. The game begins as 3 boys from the small Potos village disobey their elders' instructions and trespass into a local waterfall, where a treasure is said to be kept. One of the boys stumbles and falls into the lake, where he finds a rusty sword embedded in a stone. Guided by a disembodied voice, he pulls the sword free, inadvertently unleashing monsters in the surrounding countryside of the village. The villagers interpret the sword's removal as a bad omen and banish the boy from Potos forever. A traveling knight named Gemma recognizes the blade as the legendary Mana sword, and encourages the hero to re-energize it by visiting the 8 Mana temples. During his journey, the hero is joined by the girl and the sprite. Throughout their travels, the trio is pursued by the Empire. The Emperor and his subordinates are being manipulated by Thanatos, an ancient sorcerer who hopes to create a new, peaceful world. Due to his own body's deterioration, Thanatos is in need of a suitable body to possess. After placing the entire kingdom of Pandora under a trance, he abducts two candidates, Diluc, now enslaved, and a young Pandoran girl named Fana. He eventually chooses to possess Diluc. The Empire succeeds in unsealing all 8 mana seeds. However, Thanatos betrays the Emperor and his henchmen, killing them and seizing control of the Mana Fortress for himself. The hero and his party journey to locate the Mana Tree, the focal point of the world's life energy. Anticipating their arrival, Thanatos positions the Mana Fortress over the tree and destroys it. The charred remains of the tree speak to the heroes, explaining that a giant dragon called the Mana Beast will soon be summoned to combat the fortress. However, the beast has little control over its rage and will likely destroy the world as well. The Mana Tree also reveals that it was once the human wife of Seiken, the original Mana Knight, and the Heros father. The voice heard at Poto's waterfall was that of Seiken's ghost. The trio flies to the Mana Fortress and confronts Thanatos, who is preparing to transfer his mind into Diluc. With the last of his strength, Diluc warns that Thanatos has sold his soul to the underworld and must not be allowed to have the fortress. Diluc kills himself, forcing Thanatos to revert to a skeletal lich form, which the party defeats. The Mana Beast finally flies in and attacks the fortress. The hero expresses reluctance to kill the beast, fearing that with the dispersal of mana from the world, the sprite will vanish. With the sprite's encouragement, he uses the fully energized mana sword to slay the beast, causing it to explode and transform into snow. At the conclusion of the game, the hero is seen welcomed back in Potos, returning the mana sword to its place beneath the waterfall. Development. Secret of Mana was directed and designed by Koichi Ishii, the creator of the game's Game Boy predecessor, Final Fantasy Adventure. He has stated that he feels Secret of Mana is more his game than other projects he has worked on, such as the Final Fantasy series. The game was programmed primarily by Nazir Gbeli and produced by veteran Square designer Hiromichi Tanaka. The team hoped to build on the foundation of Final Fantasy Adventure, and they included several modified elements from that game and from other popular Square titles in Secret of Mana. In addition to having better graphics and sound quality than its predecessor, the attack power gauge was changed to be more engaging, and the weapon leveling system replaced Final Fantasy Adventure's system of leveling up the speed of the attack gauge. The party system also received an upgrade from the first Mana game. Instead of temporary companions who could not be upgraded, party members became permanent protagonists and could be controlled by other players. The multiplayer component was not a part of the original design, but was added when the developers realized that they could easily make all 3 characters human-controlled. The real-time battle system used in Secret of Mana has been described by its creators as an extension of the battle system used in the first 3 flagship Final Fantasy titles. The system for experience points and leveling up was taken from Final Fantasy III. According to Tanaka, the game's battle system features mechanics that had first been considered for Final Fantasy IV. Similarly, unused features in Secret of Mana were appropriated by the Chrono Trigger team, which like Final Fantasy IV was in production at the time. Secret of Mana was originally planned to be a launch title for the SNES CD add-on. After the contract between Nintendo and Sony to produce the add-on failed, and Sony repurposed its work on the SNES CD into the competing PlayStation console, Square adapted the game for the SNES cartridge format. The game had to be altered to fit the storage space of a SNES game cartridge, which is much smaller than that of a CD-ROM. The developers initially resisted continuing the project without the CD add-on, believing that too much of the game would have to be cut, but they were overruled by company management. As a result of the hardware change, several features had to be cut from the game, and some completed work needed to be redone. One of the most significant changes was the removal of the option to take multiple routes through the game that led to several possible endings, in contrast to the linear journey in the final product. The plot that remained was different than the original conception, and Tanaka has said that the original story had a much darker tone, as she has estimated that up to 40% of the planned game was dropped to meet the space limitations, and critics have suggested that the hardware change led to technical problems when too much happens at once in the game. In 2006, Level magazine claimed that Secret of Mana's rocky development was Square's main inspiration to move their games, such as the Final Fantasy series, from Nintendo consoles to Sony consoles in 1996. The English translation for Secret of Mana was completed in only 30 days, mere weeks after the Japanese release, and the North American localization was initially advertised as Final Fantasy Adventure 2. Critics have suggested that the translation was done hastily so that the game could be released in North America for the 1993 holiday season. According to translator Ted Woolsey, a large portion of the game's script was cut out in the English localization due to space limitations. To display text on the main gameplay screen, the English translation uses a fixed-width font, which limits the amount of space available to display text. Woolsey was unhappy that he had to trim conversations to their bare essentials, and that he had so little time for translation, commenting that it nearly killed me. The script was difficult to translate as it was presented to Woolsey in disordered groups of text, like shuffling a novel. Other localizations were done in German and French. The Japanese release only named the 3 protagonists in the manual, while Western versions omitted the characters' names until the enhanced port on the iOS.
Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like